Our mission, as always, is to really cut through the noise and give you the essential knowledge on things that, well, shape your life. And today, we're tackling a hormone that honestly has a terrible PR problem. It's cortisol, often painted as the big villain of modern stress. You probably heard about cortisol, mainly in connection with, weight gain, maybe anxiety, or just not being able to sleep. It gets treated like this emergency thing we've overused. But the truth is, and the sources you shared really back this up, cortisol is absolutely fundamental. It's life-sustaining. We need it. So let's just start with the basics. Where does it come from? It's a steroid hormone made in your adrenal glands.
Right, they sit right on top of your kidneys.
Yeah, but it's not quite like adrenaline, is it? Adrenaline's fast, in and out. Cortisol is different. It's a glucocorticoid.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that term. Glucocorticoid. That name itself tells you a lot. It's not just about stress. It's heavily involved in glucose management, sugar, energy. It's really the ultimate regulator. I mean, what's fascinating is that cortisol touches nearly every single organ, every tissue in your body. It's working constantly to maintain balance, what scientists call homeostasis. You literally couldn't survive without it. We always hear the stress headline, yeah, but we miss the deep cuts, the everyday functions. Cortisol is basically the system architect, making sure the whole machine keeps running. Doesn't matter if you're actually in danger or if you just, skipped breakfast.
That distinction is so important. Survival versus just chronic grinding stress. It means cortisol has this whole suite of jobs that have nothing to do with immediate stress, jobs we often ignore. It really is multifaceted, like you said, controlling how your body uses sugar for energy. But also things like blood pressure regulation.
Yeah, fluid balance too.
Right, and acting as a natural anti-inflammatory, at least in short bursts.
And maybe the best proof of its everyday non-stress role, your sleep. Cortisol is absolutely fundamental to your circadian rhythm, your internal clock.
How does that work exactly?
Well, if you look at the pattern across the day, cortisol levels are naturally lowest in the late evening. That helps you wind down, get ready for sleep. But then they don't just stay low, they surge. They peak really sharply in the early morning, literally right before you wake up.
Ah, so it's like the body's own alarm clock signal.
Precisely. It's mobilizing energy, getting you ready to face the day the moment you open your eyes. And that happens completely separate from any, immediate external stress.
Okay, so it's the hormone that really kicks your metabolism into gear each morning. That makes total sense. Now let's pivot to its most famous job, stress. This is what gets really interesting, especially the timing. People tend to lump all stress hormones together, adrenaline, cortisol.
Yeah, but they're sequential.
Right. Cortisol isn't actually the first responder. It comes after the initial fight or flight rush from adrenaline and noradrenaline. So if adrenaline is the immediate jolt, the fire alarm and the sprint away, what's cortisol doing then?
Cortisol is about sustainment. It's the follow-up crew. Adrenaline gives you that instant burst, sure, but cortisol keeps you alert, potentially for hours if needed. And crucially, it makes sure you have the fuel to maintain that high alert status. This is where its metabolic role just becomes paramount.
Fuel, meaning sugar.
Exactly. Fast energy.
Yeah.
When your body thinks it's under threat, real or perceived, it needs a massive amount of glucose, quickly. Cortisol triggers the liver to release stored sugar. It even starts a process called gluconeogenesis, literally making new glucose.
And it's not just pulling from the liver's reserves, is it? I read it can break down other things too.
Precisely. It directs the body to start breaking down proteins, even from muscle tissue, sometimes bone, converting them into sugar. It's like an emergency austerity measure for survival. And to make sure that fuel gets where it needs to go, mainly the brain and essential muscles, it manipulates the pancreas. It basically tells it, hey, decrease insulin sensitivity.
Which normally lowers blood sugar.
Right. And increase glucagon, which raises blood sugar. It's rerouting everything, all non-essential functions, like digestion, reproductive stuff, put on hold. Temporarily.
It's basically commandeering the entire metabolic system for the emergency. No wonder chronic stress feels so draining. You're constantly running this massive energy deficit.
Okay, let's talk about that inflammation paradox you mentioned earlier. This is fascinating. We usually hear cortisol is bad for the immune system, weakens it, but you're saying in short bursts, it actually limits inflammation. How does that work? How does it flip?
That's such a critical point. Initially, cortisol acts as a potent anti-inflammatory. It dampens the immune response so your body doesn't overreact during an acute crisis. That's the good side, boosting short-term resilience.
The problem kicks in with chronic stress. When cortisol levels are high all the time, the immune cells, which have receptors for cortisol, start to tune it out. They down-regulate those receptors or just become less sensitive. Think of it like like someone shouting at you constantly. Eventually, you just stop listening, right?
Yeah, you tuned it out.
That's basically what happens. It's called glucocorticoid resistance. The body starts ignoring the signal. So the very thing that was supposed to put the brakes on inflammation, well, the brakes stop working effectively. And that leads to unchecked systemic inflammation and ultimately a weakened immune system overall.
So it's not the hormone itself that's inherently bad. It's the chronic, unrelenting exposure that causes the system to break down, to become resistant. Balance is everything.
Absolutely vital. And because that balance is so critical, the body has this incredibly sophisticated control system. It's a three-part axis: the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands, the HPA axis.
The HPA axis, okay.
Think of it like a chain of command. The hypothalamus is like the CEO. It's constantly monitoring cortisol levels in your blood. If they drop too low, the CEO sends out the first instruction, a hormone called CRH, corticotropin-releasing hormone.
Okay, memo from the top.
Exactly. That memo goes down to the middle manager, the pituitary gland.
And the pituitary then issues the order to the factory floor.
You got it. The pituitary reads the CRH memo and responds by releasing its own hormone, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. ACTH is the signal that travels down to the adrenal glands, the factory, telling them, okay, produce and release cortisol.
Wow.
All three, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals, they all have to be working, communicating perfectly for this whole system to stay stable and balanced.
And when that communication network breaks down, that's when we see serious issues, right? Like hormonal diseases.
Yeah.
Let's look at what happens when there's too much cortisol. That's hypercortisolism or Cushing syndrome. The causes seem to often involve that signaling pathway getting overwhelmed somehow. It could be external, like taking high doses of steroid medications for a long time. Prednisone is a common one.
Very common, yeah.
Or it could be internal.
Yeah.
Maybe a tumor on the pituitary gland pumping out way too much ACTH, that command signal. Or sometimes a tumor on the adrenal gland itself, just churning out cortisol nonstop.
And if you connect the symptoms of Cushing's back to those mechanisms we talked about, making glucose, breaking down protein, they suddenly make a lot more sense than just a random list of problems.
How so?
Well, think about the really noticeable weight gain. It's often specifically around the belly and the face, the moon face, they sometimes call it. That's cortisol redirecting how fat is stored. But at the same time, look closely, the arms and legs might actually be quite thin. The skin bruises easily. That's the protein breakdown we mentioned. The body literally sacrificing muscle and connective tissue to make sugar.
Right, the catabolism.
Exactly. And then you see high blood sugar, which often develops into type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. Those are direct consequences of cortisol messing with normal metabolism and fluid balance. Weak bones, fractures too.
That really does clarify it. It's not just random weight gain. It's a very specific, destructive pattern of tissue change. Okay, now let's flip the switch. What about too little cortisol? Hypocortisolism or adrenal insufficiency?
Yeah, also known as Addison's disease in its primary form. If Cushing's is the system stuck in overdrive, hypocortisolism is the system perpetually running on empty. In primary adrenal insufficiency, or Addison's, it's usually an autoimmune issue. Your own immune system mistakenly attacks the adrenal glands, basically shutting down the cortisol factory.
Okay.
Then there's secondary insufficiency. That means the problem isn't the adrenals themselves, but the pituitary gland isn't sending enough ACTH, that command signal. So the adrenals just aren't getting the message to produce cortisol.
And what causes that?
Well, one of the most common causes, actually, is stopping long-term steroid medication too suddenly.
Like the prednisone again.
Exactly. If you've been taking it for months, your body's own HPA axis has been suppressed. It hasn't needed to make its own cortisol. If you suddenly remove that external source, the natural system is too sluggish. It can't just switch back on immediately.
That makes sense. And the symptoms sound like the complete opposite of Cushing's then.
Pretty much. Instead of that hypermetabolic state, you see a massive systemic slowdown. Persistent, overwhelming fatigue is a big one. Unintentional weight loss because the body can't regulate energy properly, loss of appetite, and often critically, low blood pressure because cortisol also plays a role in maintaining blood volume and pressure.
Okay, so clearly if you're dealing with something like confirmed Cushing's or Addison's, you need medical treatment medications, sometimes surgery, that's essential. But for many of us, maybe just dealing with the effects of chronic stress driving cortisol levels higher than ideal day to day. Our sources mentioned several really powerful practical strategies, and they seem focused on kind of manually overriding that HPA stress response.
That's the key, isn't it? We need to actively engage the other side of the nervous system, the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest system. We need to consciously pull the emergency brake on cortisol production. And the sources really emphasize some of the basics, things we often, frankly, neglect.
Like sleep.
Absolutely number one. Remember that circadian rhythm. Chronic sleep problems like insomnia or consistently working against your body clock, think night shifts, directly messes with that natural nightly dip in cortisol. Levels stay higher. Prioritizing consistent quality sleep is paramount.
Okay, sleep first. What else?
Well, for a really immediate effect, breathing. It sounds simple, but deep controlled breathing exercises work wonders. They stimulate something called the vagus nerve, which is like the main highway for your parasympathetic system. It sends a direct signal to your brain, okay, calm down, stop the stress response. It can lower cortisol almost immediately, like hitting a reset button.
A neurological reset button. I like that. What about exercise?
Movement definitely helps, but consistency is key. Regular physical activity doesn't just help you manage stress perception, it also significantly improves your sleep quality.
Ah, so it feeds back into the sleep benefit.
Exactly. It creates this positive cycle that supports that healthy cortisol drop in the evening.
Makes sense. And finally, there's the human element, right? Connection, even laughter.
Yeah, don't underestimate that. Laughing isn't just fun, it's biologically beneficial. It releases endorphins, those feel-good chemicals, and it actually suppresses cortisol. It's a real biochemical effect.
Yeah.
And alongside that, maintaining healthy relationships. Social support is huge. Constant conflict or feeling isolated. That acts as a chronic psychological stressor, keeping that HPA axis buzzing when it shouldn't be.
It's quite powerful when you think about it. Managing this essential hormone isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about actively structuring your life, your sleep, your connections, even how you breathe, to send your body the signal that it's safe, so it can finally turn off that constant emergency alert.
Well said.
All right, let's do a quick recap for you. Cortisol. Yes, involved in stress, but absolutely critical for life itself. It links our stress response, our basic ability to get energy from food, and even our daily sleep-wake cycle. We've seen the dangers aren't from cortisol existing, but from chronic overuse, leading to metabolic chaos and cells that stop listening, that resistance.
You know, this brings up an interesting point to leave you with. We talked about how chronic high cortisol leads to glucocorticoid resistance, where the immune cells basically ignore its anti-inflammatory message, resulting in overall inflammation. So if inflammation is actually a necessary first step for acute healing, think repairing a cut, fighting off a bug locally, what might be the long-term consequence if the body's ability to respond properly to cortisol signals is constantly being dampened or ignored? Could it interfere with those necessary short-term healing processes over time? How does that long-term resistance potentially impact other essential localized inflammatory responses needed for repair and protection? That's definitely something worth exploring further.